let's have a think about how do we know that we exist? Okay, how do we know that? Huh?
I say so.
Yeah, okay, but like, how did you come to know that you exist? Are you born knowing it? Do you think that when you were a toddler, you knew that you existed? Or are there certain conditions?
Oh, my toes.
Guys, shush. Okay? Are you born knowing that you exist? Or are there certain conditions that has to be met in order for you to know that you exist, right? Like, does a toddler know that it exists? Does anybody have any thoughts?
I think
Okay. Whatever. Let's say we have like a dog.
Bro,
right?
me gaining consciousness in the Walmart shopping mall.
Yeah, exactly. Like something. Okay, so let's say we have like a wolf, right? And then it's in the wild, it's in the nature. He doesn't need to know that he exists. Let's say he encounters like another thing. Let's say he encounters a little spider. All he needs to do is he looks at the spider and he sees what the spider does, and then he reacts to it, right? So it's like you do something, I react to it. I don't need to think about myself. I only need to look at you. I only need to think about you, right? This will make more sense in a moment, right? Now let's say that we have a human, right? Let's say we have a human, and then I'm talking to a girl.
Right.
Okay.
That's not accurate.
Yeah, not factually correct. Okay, and then now I have to think. Okay, before I talk, like let's say she says hi, right? I have to think before I talk. Like, okay, what do I say? Right? I have to imagine myself. I have to imagine myself in the third person. I have to imagine myself as someone listening to myself speak. Like, if I imagine myself saying "fuck you," that's not a very good reaction, right? It's gonna be like, wait, I'm gonna fuck up. I can't say that, right? So I have to simulate myself in my brain, and that's how I know that I exist. It's only when we engage in conversation or in interpersonal sort of interactions that we come to realize that we exist, right? So it requires, not always, but this is when it first starts. This is when it first begins. This is when we become self-conscious, right?
Self-conscious.
Yeah. And animals aren't self-conscious because they don't need to simulate themselves in their heads. They don't need to think like, oh, if I do this, the spider's gonna do this, and so I can't do this and whatever. They don't really do that. Can you close the door? Thank you. Are you coming in? Okay.
What's this club?
The ethics club. Okay, cool.
Shame.
So to form sort of the self-image, the image that we have of ourselves, right? The concept of self. It's not something that we're born with. It's not something like we're not born with an image of ourselves in our head, right? It's something that we need to build, right? And to build this, we need to view ourselves in the third person, right? We need confirmation from a third person to know what we are, right? If I think that okay, no, it doesn't matter. And so, what's another thing in the third person that can also confirm our identity? It's other people, right? So there's two sources of our identity. The first is what we think we are, and the other is what society thinks we are. Because look, if you think about this, right, our identity, a lot of our identity is dependent on what society thinks, right? If I think I'm respectful, for example, I think that I am deserving of respect, but society doesn't think I'm deserving of respect. Then I don't deserve respect, because this identity actually relies on what society recognizes me as. Does that make sense? So, let's say that after self-reflection, I think that I am human and I deserve respect. But let's also say that I was a Jew in 1929 Germany. Maybe even 1939 Germany. So society thinks that I'm not a person. And I don't deserve respect. So what's happening here is I'm not getting recognition. I'm not getting recognized. As a person. And this recognition is super important because basically all of our identity depends on this recognition, right? For example, let's say I worked like 12 hours on a project and I'm super proud of it, and I think that I made something really worth value, right? But I don't decide this value. No, society. Society is the one that decides the value. Society recognizes me as someone who made something valuable, and then therefore I made something valuable. But if society thinks, well, no, you didn't make something valuable, then you didn't, right? And it's the same way with being a human, or being anything, or being any way at all, right? But being a human is the most important thing, right? Because we all want to be treated with respect. Is that right? Nobody wants to be disrespected, right? And so how do we make sure as a society that we always get the respect that we want? It's through something called human rights law, right? And this isn't like the origin of human rights law. This is just like why human rights law is so important. Because the law basically tells us that we're gonna get what we want. But it also tells us the responsibility we have, which is to recognize everyone else as a human, right? And so that guarantees us that we get what we want, which is respect, as long as we, respect other people, right? And so basically in the law recognizes us as human, and that's good for us, right? Now, what happens when I think I'm a human, right? But society doesn't think I'm a human, right? There's lots of cases where this is happening. For example, in India, you have like the untouchable people who society doesn't recognize them as human, right? And like Jews in Germany, they weren't recognized as human. Gay people in like America, maybe like 50 years ago, they weren't recognized as very much human. So there's this inequality, right? There's this dissonance. So what do you do when there's this dissonance, right? You have to fight. You have to fight for emancipation.
If you have no sense of self, because society doesn't think you have a sense of self, then why would you fight for it?
What do you mean? No. Only some things are decided by society.
Fair enough.
Right? We're not born with a sense of self, but we always, once we interact with other people, we get a sense of self. And then from this sense of self, we think that we're a certain way. But if society thinks we're another way, then we need to fight for recognition. We need to fight for recognition in order to become what we think we are, right? Like, for example, I think I'm a human, but society doesn't recognize me as one, so I have to fight for it, right? That's what black people do, that's what gay people do, that's what everyone should do, right? Let's think for a second about currently right now in Palestine, right? They talk about human rights, they talk about their human rights being violated all the time, even though this human rights law to them is just for, it doesn't do anything, right? What do you call it when like it's just for like, well, it's just for fun. they say they have human rights for fun, right? And they know that it doesn't do anything, yet they still talk about it all the time, right? Do you guys get that? Why? Why do they talk about human rights? It's because in talking about human rights, they're actually saying that I'm a human, right? They're saying to the world, I'm a human, I should be recognized as a human. Even if human rights laws don't mean anything, we need it, right? We need to be recognized by law to say that I'm a human, and I'm perfectly capable. As I'm a human, and I'm perfectly deserving of respect, right? So, yeah, something that we intuitively want. Is there anything else that I need to go over?
If you don't have anything to go over,
Anybody have a question? Does everybody get? Is there anything that people don't get that you guys don't get? Hello.
Have you read Julian Jaynes?
No.
There's a book about how theory that the barrier that prevents you from your internal voice being heard externally developed 3,000 years ago. Therefore, before that, everyone heard voices and didn't recognize them as their own.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, okay.
Let's. I know what to talk about now. Okay, so this whole thing about recognition and like how the concept of self isn't something that we're born with, rather it's something that we attain, is by someone called Hegel, who we looked at last time. It's by Hegel. He has this theory called like master and slave dynamics, right? And it's this idea that like if you're a slave, you have a master, right? Slave, he's black. He has cuffs.
This is going on the
And then
internet,
the
bro.
master is this white guy. He's happy. Right?
Are you
Okay.
assuming that there's no moral dissonance from being a slave owner?
So let's say that like the slave isn't being recognized by the master as a human, right? Not recognized. That's not good for the slave, right? But at the same time, guys, so the slave isn't recognized as a human, and the slave wants to be recognized, so it's not good for the slave. But at the same time, it's bad for the master, because the master doesn't have someone of equal level to recognize him, right? The master can't get recognition from the slave, because the slave isn't an equal. And so that's why according to Hegel, this is why slavery had to be abolished, because we want even the masters to be able to be recognized by an equal subject. And it's this idea of equality that makes recognition so powerful, right? Because if I'm recognized by someone who I think is not equal to me, then I don't really get that hit, you know? But if I'm recognized by someone who's equal to me, then I feel, yes, I feel fulfilled. I feel like I've been recognized, right? And so we need to we needed to erase this dynamic of like slaves and masters so that everyone's equal and recognition actually means something. And that's how modern law is established according to Hegel. And that modern law is basically the idea that everyone's born equal, right? And you have the set of rights under the law. And yeah, everyone's an equal subject. Modern law. Basic equality. Okay. Everybody get this? Let's think about self-respect for a second. So, according to this path, the image we have of ourselves is self-respect, basically, right? And Hegel says that if the law is there, so that if someone damages your self-respect, you can ask for remedies, right? So every crime takes something away from you. And even if it doesn't take away anything from you physically, it takes something away from your self-respect. Let's say someone beats me up on the streets, right? Although he didn't take something away from me physically, he's diminishing my self-respect, right? And so the law says that I should be able to ask for remedies in order to be remedied for this loss of my self-respect, right? Does that make sense?
What does remedy mean?
Remedy is like to be paid, to be like paid back, right? So like I sue him. I sue the person who beat me up. I go to court with him, even though he didn't take anything from me. I do that because I want to get my self-respect back, right? I want the world to know that I'm a human and I have the rights and I should be respected, even though he disrespected me. And I shouldn't have been disrespected, right? So that's what the law is all for. Does that make sense? Okay. That was a lot of information. But I feel like it's only been like 10 minutes. So, any questions? Does anybody need me to go over anything? No? Okay. All right. Yeah.